So welcome everyone, welcome to the Fin Virtual Learning Series. Please note that this session will be offered in English for the first 30 minutes. The French session will immediately follow at 2 p.m. Veuillez noter que cette session sera offerte en anglais pour les premières 30 minutes et que la présentation en français suivra à 2 heures. I would begin by acknowledging that I'm here on traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and I encourage all of you to acknowledge the land you are on as well. As we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat space and questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. You can vote for the questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. Please note that there will be no Q&A portion to this session. However, we will take your questions, find the answers, and share them as a resource on our Fin GC Wiki page. As someone who has been in the public service for around 5 years, I can easily remember a time when early in my career, I would be hearing terms such as ATIP, Section 34, or labor relations thrown around in meetings, and an immediate feeling of confusion would ensue. Some of these terms I was explained rather quickly because they directly impacted my work, while some others took months or even years to understand. We probably all know that the public service loves their many acronyms. And today we'll learn about one that is perhaps one of its most famous ones, ATIP. So what does it mean? Why is it important? And most importantly, how does it impact me? Before we get started, we have a couple of poll questions to assess your knowledge before the session. Don't worry if you don't know the answers, it's just for fun, so no stress at all. Can we put the polls up right now? Perfect. So the first question is, do you know what ATIP stands for? Yes, no, or unsure? And then who can make an ATIP request? Is it managers and above only, such as directors, senior management? Is it all public servants? Is it all Canadians? Or is it anyone, no matter where in the world they are situated? And last question is, what is atypical? Only official emails? Only MS Team chats? Only handwritten notes on the side of the desk? Or all of the above? Or none of the above? So we'll just give you a couple seconds to answer. All right, looks like it's stable. Alexa, do you want to share the answers? Thank you. So right now we have 55% of people that know what ATIP stands for, the acronym. 26% do not know, and 19% are unsure. Well, that's perfect because it's what we're here for, to learn. And then who can make an ATIP request? The most popular answer is all Canadians at 57%. We'll see if you're correct or not when Angèle, our guest speaker today, speaks and gives us all the answer. And last question, what is atypical? Most people thought all of the above. So no matter what we do as public servants, whether it's emails, chats, handwritten notes, it's all atypical is the most popular answer. Once again, Angèle will let us know if we are correct or not. Can we turn off the post for now? Perfect. So, just 1 second. Perfect. So without further ado, I'll give the mic off to Chloe Anbers, figuratively speaking, of course, who will be our moderator for today. So the floor is yours, Chloe. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for your time, Olivia. You did great. So hi, my name is Chloe. I work at the federal government for about 6 months now, and today I will be your moderator. So today on GC101, we'll learn 5 key terms you should know with respect to ATIP. Let's get started. For someone who knows nothing about ATIP, tell us about why it exists.
So ATIP is access to information and privacy, and it's one of those foundations of any functional democracy. For citizens to be able to hold their government to account, they need to be able to understand how it works. For them to know that their personal information is being taken care of properly, they need to be able to access it and see what's going on with it. So under these acts, people can submit requests to anybody, any institution, and actually find out how a decision came to be.
Great, thank you so much. And can you tell us more also who can request, the timeline to comply, as well as what gets shared and why?
So who can request? The poll was actually really close. All Canadians or permanent residents or anybody who's actually present in Canada. So you don't have to be a citizen, you don't have to be a permanent resident, you just have to be here. or you can be a citizen or permanent resident anywhere in the world. So anybody can request. Timelines are tight. So your ATIP office, when they get a request, they have 30 calendar days to respond to it. So that works out to about 20 working days. So there's a reason why when they come to you, they're going to be asking you to respond quickly, because the clock ticks and it doesn't stop for anything. Sorry, I think I might have missed the third part of that question just because it got a little glitchy for a second.
Of course. So what gets shared versus redacted, and why actually?
So what gets redacted? First off, there's things that are excluded from the purview of the Act. So things that are publicly available, things that are available for purchase, or anything that has to do with cabinet confidences. The Access Act doesn't touch them. You can't request them. You can't have them. And then there's exemptions. Exemptions is information that we can withhold apart from that. So it is subject to the Act. People can request it, but there's portions that we can withhold. And exemptions are very specific and limited. Some examples will include personal information belonging to another person. So if I request information and it's about you, Chloe, I'm not going to get, unless you provide consent, I won't be able to get that personal information. Trade secrets of a third party. So the secret formula, what is it? They say how the caramel bar gets made is the joke, the running joke. Like if that is submitted and it's in a government folder, it is a trade secret that belongs to the company, that would not be released. The information that could harm national security or that could influence the security of persons. Like there's a wide variety of different exemptions. Not all of them are mandatory. A lot of them are subject to what's called a harms test. So it has to actually have a consequence to the release. Openness should be your first default, right? Like it should be to share as much as you can because the public wants to know.
Absolutely. And I also want to say about be prepared to save the naming conventions, intellectual property.
Information management will save you when it comes to access requests. That's really what it comes down to. It makes your life incredibly easier. Once you've received an access request, you cannot delete anything that you have. So everything becomes set in stone. You have to provide it. It's against the law to delete information after it's been requested under the Access Act. So that means that if there's anything that you have, be it as innocuous as, hey, Chloe, you want to give me a call so we can chat about this? Or, hey, can we go out for lunch really quick? Or are we setting up a meeting? That all becomes subject to the Act. The things I've seen in access, in requests, I've seen communications between civil servants and their divorce lawyers. I've seen, the comments that were made about people's fantasy football leagues. Be really careful about what you write because it is accessible. Make sure that you clean up your emails, keep them tight. On our website at the OIC, we have 9 tips for good email management. I think the link is going to be provided in the resources after the fact. Read those, take care, make sure that what you do every day, you document properly. We do need to document decisions, make sure that you can find the information, but don't retain everything if it's not necessary. Does that make sense? So there's a thing called transitory documents. Those are your non-business value documents, right? So I don't know how much you guys have had. Transitory documents are anything that is for a short purpose. For example, jotting yourself a note to say, I have to call Chloe to set up a meeting. Once that meeting has been established, that note is no longer relevant. You can throw it out. If you fail to keep up with the cleaning of your transitory records, when you do get an access to information request, and everybody does, everybody gets hit with access to information requests. If you're a civil servant for any length of time, it's going to happen. All of that becomes relevant and subject to the Act. Another thing would be making sure that emails chains, oh my goodness, start a fresh chain on a new subject. How many times I've seen where there's a string of emails about a particular file, and then all of a sudden they take that string and forward it to the same people to talk about something completely separate. Well, now both of those subjects, if there's a request made under either of those two subjects, it then becomes subject to that review, if that makes sense. So do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. The comments that you can hear me better now?
It's cutting in and out.
In and out? Okay, no problem.
Perfect. So Angèle, I'm really glad that I get to talk because I have tons of questions about ATIP. So
Awesome. I love questions.
so let's talk a little bit about, so you talked to us about why ATIP exists, which makes a lot of sense because taxpayers pay our salary and they want to know what we're doing all day.
Yep.
So I think that the thing that's really important for young public servants or new public servants to understand is that the things that we do all day on taxpayer time is stuff that they are allowed to see, which is why you're picking up this fantasy football or people's potluck or secret recipes or inappropriate
Absolutely.
jokes or whatever other nonsense is going on. So what if I use my work device after hours? Like what if it's the evening and I'm using it to surf Facebook or I don't even know what.
Your browsing history can be subjected to an access request. So that's not to say that it'll all go out, right? You do have personal information and there are exemptions to protect that. However, it means that you may have to provide it to your ATIP shop and ultimately to the Office of the Information Commissioner if there's a complaint. So it is accessible. People will see it.
So when Chloe was asking about what gets redacted is a word that, I mean, you don't use in day-to-day life. So again, it's another, I'm sure only people who actually work in ATIP use that word. So let's talk about maybe, so someone makes a request about me and like you were saying, the secret of the caramel bar, that's a really great example. So they can't know the secrets, but there's stuff that they can know. So they can't know my password for Facebook, but they could know what groups I was posting in Facebook. Is that maybe the kind of stuff that they could get?
It would depend on the situation. It's hard to make those kinds of judgments without seeing the documents in front of me, because if you are on your institution's Facebook page doing work functions, that would be accessible for sure. Or if you were on work time, it would be accessible that what sites you had seen. If you were on your personal time, exit. So there's a lot of nuance depending on the situation.
I would assume that nuance has become a little bit more cloudy too, given that people are working from home. So I know for me, I actually don't feel the difference between when I'm at home and when I'm at work. So sometimes when I am looking up a recipe, I just use my work computer because it's already on and it's already here. So those lines of blurred, what is work, what is not, obviously are going to cause some real ATIP issues, are they?
Absolutely, because it is a government device. So anything on there is accessible. They can request any information that's on your work device.
It's so interesting. So when we're looking at the things that we need to keep and the things that we don't need to keep, and you talked about transitory documents, I think that that's really important because the things that you work on day to day, like some of them don't have value. I know I have this Post-it that I wrote today and it says travel. It's to remind me to do my travel request. So I'm going to throw this out at the end of the day, but it doesn't have any value to anyone. But there is a lot of things that we talk about. I know as colleagues, we work in an environment where there's other people. So there's a lot of human dynamics that come into play. Do you see a lot of, I don't want to even like go down this road, but I'm sure you see a lot of drama and clicks and stuff that happens and gets ATIP'd. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So it is extremely important to be very careful about how you express yourself. Remember that everything that you do as a civil servant is accessible, no matter the medium or form. So if it is a voicemail, a text message, Teams chat, no matter the format, that is accessible. And fun fact, so people that come in under privacy, for example, can request anything you've said about them. And remember that your opinion of me is my personal information, so I can request that. So super important that when we write about anything that we do, that we're very factual and we always maintain a level of professionalism in everything we do. I mean, otherwise it will get found out. That's what we do.
Like, I wish I could yell this from the rooftops because even the people online, I don't think understand the severity of what we're trying to say. So yeah, it's true that if Angèle and I have a discussion after this call and I say, hey, isn't it great? Wasn't Olivier great? Olivier can actually request that information where we said those comments about him. And so be really conscious when you're talking to your colleagues about a third colleague, be really conscious about if you organize a lunch and you forget to invite one person, even if it's by accident, if you celebrate a whole bunch of people's birthdays, but there's one person's birthday you don't celebrate, like this, all that stuff could be ATIP'd in a state of true drama, but we know that there are sometimes those true dramas that happen.
There can be, for sure. If you want to know what's going on in the department, your ATIP unit will find out. It's what happens. We don't want to know any more than you want us to, I promise.
So when you're in an ATIP, so let's say you get a request and you come to me, how specific are you going to be asking me? Are you going to say, hey, just hand over your laptop, I need to go through it? Or how does that work?
So what will happen is your ATIP shop will receive a request and they will review it, make sure that it meets the requirements and that it's understandable. And then they will task it out to you, and you will be responsible for gathering the information that you have under your control and providing it to them. If you have questions, if there's any issues with the request or you're not clear, call them. I mean, ATIP analysts, we want the best for everybody. We want the public to get the information that they need. We want to make sure that you understand what they're looking for. So we're very glad to clarify, to help you in any way that we can going through it.
And it's my understanding that it's actually even an art for the public to be able to ask for an ATIP, because they have to be very specific about what they're asking. Otherwise, you're going to send them a bunch of garbage that they don't know how to interpret. So they have to ask the right questions. Do you go back and forth with the end user to say, oh, did you mean this? Or do you want that? Or do you just—
We do all the time. No, we do all the time. I mean, that's part of the duty to assist. Actually, in the Access to Information, in the Access to Information Act is a codified duty to assist. So we have to go back and help them figure out what it is exactly that they're looking for, right? They don't know. They don't know that we have briefing notes, or if we call them memorandums, or if we call— John Q. Public has no idea. So it's our job to go back to them and make sure that we help them target their request and help them figure out how to word it in such a way as to find what they're looking for.
Yikes, I love it so much. Okay, I'm noticing some chat questions and some Q&A questions, and there's some good juicy stuff happening. So let's break it down, because this really is a session not about how you can make an ATIP request, but it is a session about how to protect yourself, how to be smart. And one of the questions actually is about how to manage your information so that if you get a request, it doesn't take you weeks to dig out what they're looking for, which is some of that nomenclature, some of the right folders. I know that's not sexy if you're not into IM, but if you ever get an ATIP request, it's good to be able to find the stuff that they're looking for. So one of the questions I see is about this blurred lines of telework. So I'm working from home, and like I said, I look at my recipes on my work laptop. Well, the same is true that I use my home laptop for some things, or I know I'm actually really guilty, I'll admit, I use my personal phone for work because it's an Apple iPhone and I like it better. I know how it works. So those are things that happen, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So what happens then?
You get to give it up to us. That's the thing. So if you are using your personal computer for work purposes, that is accessible under the Act. You will have to provide that information should you get a request under the Access or Privacy Acts. So that means that your personal email will be on that document. Again, as your personal information, because it's not your work email, we would be able to protect that. It wouldn't go out to John Q. Public. However, it means that you are sharing it with your ATIP shop and possibly the commissioners, depending on complaint situations. So you will not often find an access to information and privacy professional that uses their personal devices for anything work related. And I can tell you that it's because we don't think that it's it's a bad idea. It's straight up, it's a bad idea. I don't want to have to give up my text logs from my phone, my personal phone. But if you are subject of an access request.
But you work in that field, and I think that that's why we wanted to have this discussion, because ATIP is something that you don't really know until you get hit with it, and then you're like, uh-oh, this is not good. The people in an ATIP shop know everything about everything. Now, when you guys sit down and talk to each other, I'm sure it's really hot gossip, but obviously you guys can't tell other people, right? So the ATIP advisors don't get to tell their friends and friends of friends and neighbors all the hot juice. Okay, well, that's good.
No.
It's
we don't talk about it amongst ourselves generally either, just because we don't want to know. Like we like our colleagues. I don't want to know the drama.
Yeah.
Like none of us want to. We just want to do our jobs.
I can't even imagine. Okay, so what are the consequences if you don't produce the records? Like, let's say you can't find them, or you drag your feet and pretend you can't find them. What's the consequence?
So that's between you and your manager. Your ATIP shop will escalate that because we need it. We have a statutory deadline, right? The law imposes a deadline. So if you fail to be cooperative, that will be escalated from there. If you're deliberately withholding information, it's illegal and it's actually punishable by a fine of up to $10,000 or a year in prison. So Section 67.1 of the Act makes it a crime to purposely destroy or alter documents to avoid access or to counsel anybody else to do so.
We see things like that on like TV shows where they like destroy the evidence so that the lawyers can't have it in court. Same deal. Okay, you're talking a language I understand, so you cannot shred documents just because you don't want someone to see them. Noted.
No, once an ATIP request is hit, and this is why I stress transitory records. Like at the end of my workday, I clean out my email box. Any of the take this course or GC connects that or GCpedia this, I get rid of all the transitory stuff because I don't want to have these 8-mile long email trains for an access request.
So you have inbox 0. That's amazing.
I would love to have inbox 0. That's my goal. Let's leave it at that. But I do not retain transitory records. Like I'm very strict about it because once an ATIP request has been received, that's it. You can't delete anything. You're done. It's frozen and you are now stuck with that until it's done.
That like freeze tag. Everybody's getting that,
Pretty
right?
much.
So that's it. When it comes, it's too late to go back and say, oh,
Yep.
I wish I had done this. So let me read you some of the questions that are coming up in the chat.
Sure.
Let's talk about MS Teams. So what those chats are getting automatically deleted because, I mean, the server doesn't want to store all of our chats of random things. Are you going for coffee or something like that? So I know that stuff happens in Teams chat. So what happens with that information for an ATIP request? Where does it go or does it disappear?
So if the Teams chat has already been cleared out and it's not there, it doesn't exist. So if it's the same as a transitory email. If it's been deleted, it's been deleted. That's just the situation. However, if you have received the subject, if you have received a request and it's covered in that Teams chat, screenshot it or whatever download option is available and provide that with your responsive records.
Okay. I'm having a look. I see you guys are interested. It's good that you're interested. This is very scary. This is probably the only scary thing about being a public servant is that whatever you do, other people want to know. And when they want to know, they're allowed to find out. Ooh, I love this. This person has something in mind. Can a team meeting or meetings between colleagues be ATIP'd?
Absolutely. Every record that you create, regardless of medium or form, there's no caveat for meetings or anything else. Anything that you create, any document record that you create in the course of your duties can be ATIP'd.
But what if you and I have a meeting and we didn't write anything down? Can that be ATIP'd?
It can. There's not much that can be provided. I mean, if there's no documents or records, then it can't be provided. However, you do have a duty to document your decision-making process. So if a decision was made during that meeting, you should have taken note, and that would be atypical. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yikes. Now I don't even want to be friends with public servants. It's all too risky. My friends all pose too much risk. So there's a question here about applying retroactively for earlier data. So how about, I'm going to interpret that question. What about the last department you worked at? So you don't work there anymore and someone has done an ATIP request. Are you responsible for finding that data or is your old department responsible for digging around for that data?
It would be the department that's received it, that's responsible for retrieving those records. So most public servants, part of your exit process would be to store all of your records of business value in their appropriate folders and close out your files. So if you are looking for information from a prior position or a prior department, you would have to go to that department. They would look in the files.
So if I left an old department and I had a bunch of recipes and someone Googled someone ATIP'd my recipe habits, they could ATIP them at my current department and my past departments.
They could, however, if you did your due diligence when you left, you would have made sure that you cleaned out your email box and it would not exist. So,
and just for the record, for the audience, I actually cannot cook. So there are no recipes. I'm just using that as something easy for all of us to understand.
She starts receiving a million ATIP requests. I want all her recipe lists.
Yeah, please don't. There are none. I cannot make anything. So, I've seen where somebody put a request in for, we had done not at this department, a previous department I worked at, a compilation of recipes from the staff for a Christmas fundraiser, and that completely got ATIP'd, and we sent it out. I think it's interesting. I find it's a fascinating. I think it's good because it holds us all accountable. I also think it's important that we remind each other regularly that that's a thing, because we get so tied up in our day-to-day that we aren't planning for an ATIP request. And then I know that I've actually, a couple of jobs ago, there was an ATIP request that came in, and we were digging, and it was so hard to dig because we were not prepared with our information management in order to set things up, in order to be able to find what we were looking for. And so that's one of the reasons it's so important with young departments, small networks, anybody who has information, like try to find a way to store it in a way that makes sense, just so that you don't have to dig and stress yourself out while you're searching for something, because that's actually business time. Is that correct, Angèle? Like if I have to supply information and it takes me 2 weeks, then I'm out of work for 2 weeks while I'm digging for that.
Exactly. It's a part of every public servant's job.
Wow. Okay. Well, I've learned enough. Not enough to actually, I've learned enough to be scared, not enough to teach a course. So what
no
we're
need to
do,
be scared.
We're going to pass it over to Olivier. He's going to wrap us up. Et on va le continuer en français. So we're going to continue it off in French for the next session. We're going to start from scratch. And Olivier, I will let you do the French questions, and I will stay on behind the scenes and listen to some new and exciting answers. Thank you, Angèle.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jen, for last minute help. It was amazing, all that we could ask for. Actually, I have a question of my own, because I remember, Angèle, we talked about this yesterday. Do you have the data on how many ATIP requests are made per year?
I do, actually. So the last year for which the stats have been published are 2020, 2021. So in 2020 and 2021, say that 3 times fast, 2021, it was 145,900 under the Access Act. That's across government that was reported. And there was just under 75,000 under the Privacy Act. So it's something that people do very regularly. It's used by academics, by Joe Public, by researchers, journalists. The commercial sector uses it a lot. So,
wow, that's amazing. Do you filter them at all when you receive them? If there's one that doesn't make any sense, do you still have to process that one, or?
So again, that goes back to the duty to assist. If we get a request and we don't understand it all, we'll call the requester. We'll give them, we want to help people find the information they're looking for to the extent possible. So if we're unclear, we won't task it until we understand what they're looking for.
That's great. I think that's a lot of information for this session. You're in wealth of so much knowledge, and ATIP, it's unbelievable. I think my knowledge personally starting the session versus my knowledge now is so much increased, and I'm glad you're staying with us for the French session, which will be starting in a couple minutes. So thank you, Angèle.